Good morning. Good morning. We would like to continue, and I'm delighted that we have here with us the Minister of Energy, Dr. Yuval Steinitz. Yuval, within his capacity, he's the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission. He has a very rich career in Israeli politics, and if I'm not mistaken, 21 years in the Knesset. He was the Minister of Finance, and he is currently the Minister of Energy. He was the chairman of the Security and Foreign Affairs Committee, and of course, he has a PhD in philosophy that he received from the neighboring buildings here of the Tel Aviv University. We're discussing a topic which is very important for Israel, both economically and strategically. We in the INSS, we study this topic as well because it has such tremendous potential that you've started already realizing it. And in the next 25 minutes, we will be discussing this issue. The audience, not just the people sitting in this hall, in the general public, is quite confused regarding this topic of energy. Is it good to export? Is it good to keep the gas reserves? What are the revenues? Where do they go? What is the taxation on gas? The environmental issues related to this topic. 5 minutes, Yuval. Please. Put some order into this topic. Explain to us. It's always very exciting for me. Thank you. It's always very exciting for me to return to the place where I received my PhD, and I even taught philosophy of science for several years, in the Gilman building, just 200 meters from here. But of course, you invited me here not as a philosopher, but as the Minister of Energy, and I will now answer your question. Look, the natural gas revolution is one of historic significance in Israel, and it has certain elements that I don't think we've completely fathomed this, but these elements will strengthen and enhance the Zionist endeavor for many generations. It has immense economic implications as well as geopolitical and geostrategic implications, and another implication or significance, which is the most important one, but people don't always pay attention to that. It allows us to reduce to a bare minimum the air pollution and to dramatically improve the environment and public health care, at least for the next 30 to 40 years, for our children and for our grandchildren. But since you started with the economic dimension, I'd like to address the economic aspect first. What does the huge gas reservoirs that were detected in the years 2009 to 2011, and the ones that will still be discovered in the future, how will that contribute to the Israeli economy? There's a forecast, a projection for some other fields. Yes, according to the assessment of an international team of experts which submitted a report 2.5 years ago, what was discovered so far is 1/3, perhaps even only 1/4 of the potential that will be discovered. And I'm only talking about the sea, the economic waters. So first of all, economically, let's start not with the state revenues, but the contribution to Israel's economic growth. Until 7 or 8 years ago, the energy issue was a burden to Israel. You must provide energy, fuels, water. That's also included in energy, even though it's a bit different. These are, the basic needs of a modern society, a modern economy, but we paid a dear price for energy twice. First of all the energy in Israel was imported, whether it is coal or diesel oil or fuel. jet fuel. It was a tremendous economic cost, and that impacted our GDP because we needed to subtract the cost of imported energy from that because we don't generate it. And we paid a very dear economic price for a energy, but also with respect to public health. It was a necessity to use coal and diesel oil in the 20 odd power plants scattered all over Israel. And according to the OECD report, the air pollution in 2015, only 5 years ago, every year about 2,200 Israelis died directly as a result of air pollution. It's 7 times more than in car accidents, and millions of Israelis lost approximately a year of their life. If we manage to get rid of the air pollution or reduce it by 90%, then the life expectancy of both men and women would have been increased by 1 year. So for that energy, we had to pay tremendous economic and environmental costs. So what's the situation today? Thanks to this discovery and thanks to the fact that we have managed to realize and to develop Leviathan and Tamar before that, and then Karish and Tanin, but Tamar is the largest field. So first of all, with respect to economic growth, only this year, and the Treasury presented this to the government 3 weeks ago, the Treasury and the Bank of Israel, that only the export, not what we actually use. Most of the gas is used for our own domestic usage, but only exporting the surplus to Egypt and Jordan will contribute 1/3% of growth, and if it'll grow, it'll even reach 0.5% addition to growth, and that's the difference between 3 to 3.5 percentage of growth. And all the credit rating companies that started talking about the fact that the deficit has grown a bit, and it was asked, Fitch, S&P, Moody's, all the companies that provide credit ratings for all the countries in the world, when they were asked what's the situation in Israel, we say we are going to keep Israel's high rating intact, and we might even improve it, upgrade it in the future. And the reasons they listed, one of them was the success in the development of Leviathan. So this is a tremendous contribution to the added value of the Israeli economy, because the fact that the energy is all made here, then it simply improves our GDP. And there's also a price reduction. The electricity prices went down by 4.5% in January, especially because of the introduction of Leviathan, and because the gas price there is even lower than it was before. And let me finish with the economic aspect. And of course, there are the state revenues. And there's a lot of confusion here because people are trying to confuse others intentionally. So let me clarify. The direct revenues, not indirect, if we're talking about reduction of costs and growth, etc. Direct income, direct revenues from grass can be divided into 3 types of taxes. A company, a regular corporate tax, and also the tax that is called the Shishinsky tax in Israel. Royalties. And royalties, the corporate tax usually comes in the first or second years once you have a profitable balance to these companies. The special tax that we passed in 2011 following the Shishinsky Committee, it comes only after you return 150% of the investment in developing the gas field, without getting into all the calculations, because every tax is taken in a different manner at a different time. But when you look at the entire lifespan of the field, 20% comes from royalties, 20% from the corporate tax, and 60% from the special tax. Yuval, where do the revenues go? Do they go directly to the budgetary vein, so to speak, or are they kept in a special fund? Well, that's a nice question. Well, actually, you can divide the answer. The royalties, they existed even before the Shishinsky Committee. Before I really delved into this, as a Minister of Finance, we already had the royalties. It's 12.5%, and allegedly there was the corporate tax as well, but there was a certain deduction which I canceled, and it almost completely negated the corporate tax. So just to give you the full picture, in 2010, when I started looking into this as Minister of Finance, I discovered that we were getting only 20% of the profits, and that was the lowest percentage, the lowest ratio in the world. After Shishinsky, we went up to 60 to 65% of the profits to the country and its people, and 30 to 35% that went to the energy companies. And that's the standard in the Netherlands, the US, the Britain and Canada. Where does the money go to? The royalties and the corporate tax. These go directly to the budget, to the treasury, the state coffers. The tax on over profits goes to a sovereign capital fund. And let me just tell you the numbers. In 2011, I said, when I presented the Shishinsky legislation, when it was brought to second and third readings in the Knesset, I said the majority, most of the big money from gas will come in about 10 years, and it'll become really big in 15 years. So between 2021 to 2025, this year, the estimates are that we will get approximately 4 billion shekels, both royalties and taxes. Next year, probably, and it depends on the prices and the quantities, it'll be approximately 6, and in 2025 it'll be approximately 10 to 15 billion shekels a year, and in 2028 approximately it will be several dozens of billions of shekels in addition to the state revenues every year. And it, of course, will not replace high tech. It's not instead of high tech and other industries and branches, but in addition of several dozens of billions every year. That's a significant addition that can be used for education, welfare, infrastructure. Thank you. And now we're not, doing any kind of promotion for books here.
But you published a book just recently, and very rightfully you spend a lot of time talking about this issue, the story of the gas. And if I wanted to recommend a book on energy, the field of energy in Israel and the Israeli perspective, I would recommend this book. But I would like to talk about strategy, because after all, we, the INSS, we deal with strategy. So we now export to Egypt and Jordan. By the way, it's the birthday of King Abdallah. We should send him a happy birthday from here. This is a very important envelope that we provide strategically, state-wise, to Israel. So and Jordan has already began, the gas to Jordan has already begun flowing. There's, of course, very, severe critique about this in Parliament, but can we ease the Jordanian government's job by doing a buyback, meaning we buy from them solar energy, because they're very much developing the entire issue of renewable energy, solar energy? Can we also help ourselves and them at the same time? As for Egypt, first of all, Egypt, they've discovered natural reservoirs. They have their own capacity to self-supply. But is this maybe a potential cause of friction between us and the Egyptians? Okay, I want to give you the basic numbers first. Gas to Egypt is already flowing. To Jordan, it began on the 1st of January. To Egypt on the 15th of January. And the Egyptian Minister of Energy, Tariq al-Mullah, he and I came out with a big announcement in order to mark this event. Up until now, the agreements that were signed with Egypt and with Jordan, and this is just the beginning, have already reached a value of $32 billion. And when I was with Tariq al-Mullah, the Minister of Energy in Egypt, just last year, in the last few months, he says that since the peace agreement between Egypt and Israel 40 years ago, between Sadat and Begin, historically, there has never been a strategic economic partnership between Egypt and Israel of this scope. This is just the beginning. So the geopolitical significance is vast. When I talk about strengthening the axis of peace through economic partnerships and alliances, I mean, there were such things in the past, obviously, but nothing that came close to $30 billion like this deal and so forth. Not only that, a common initiative of mine and the Egyptian Energy Ministry is the establishment of a regional natural gas council in which various states in the Middle East and Europe are members, apart from Israel and Egypt. Italy, Greece, Cyprus, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority also members. France has now submitted its candidacy and it wants to be part of this group as well. And this is the first time that there is an alliance, an official alliance between countries in this region. This is not just a meeting between people, an actual council of Israel and European countries and Arab countries to talk about financial opportunities together. So this is an amazing opportunity. In Egypt, by the way, they also decided to cover this in the media. They had a press conference. I and Tariq El-Mula, the other minister, were there with dozens of journalists and correspondents asking us questions. And to my amazement, by the way, there was a picture, a photo of several energy ministers, me included, with Sisi in Alexandria and all of the other Egyptian officials. So this is of enormous geopolitical significance. As for Jordan, oh, and by the way, in regards to Egypt, I'm moving on, but we're also talking about with the Palestinians about providing gas to the Jenin power plant. Not only talking to them, we're not just talking anymore. We are in advanced steps of planning the actual power plant and the transmission grid. So they're going to get Israeli gas as well, the Palestinians. We're also willing, and we've begun talking to the Palestinians of developing the small marine rig, it's called. So under this umbrella of this Mediterranean Gas Forum, what you have is the beginnings of very broad regional associations and cooperation. As for regards to the buying of gas from Jordan, whether it's from Israel or whatever, I don't want to, disclose private information, but I would say that we've already expressed our willingness to talk about these things. So that's a very important step. Now, as for this broad strategic envelope designed by Israel recently, the Prime Minister and you signed an agreement with Greece, Cyprus, and Italy of the laying of the pipe that will transfer natural gas from the middle of the Mediterranean to Europe. So, can you tell me anything about the economic and technological feasibility and the political feasibility, which I believe is quite complex? We're here, of course, I bring in the Turkish issue. The entire Turkish issue has become very problematic. There's a lot of backlash on what's happening in natural gas in Cyprus. Okay, I'll begin with a little story how it all began. When I began my position as energy ministry, I was clear to them that we had so much surplus gas. I mean, we didn't even know everything we had at the time, but it was already clear we had surplus gas, that we will have to export our surplus gas. And also, in order to develop the Leviathan rig, we have to have export because the local market was not big enough in order to support the investment of $4 billion that were required in order to build the installation. Leviathan is an infrastructure base, the biggest infrastructure project of the state of Israel, the single project, bigger than any road or airport or military base or power station. It's vast. So then we had to think export. Okay, so the first thing you consider is, okay, we'll export to Jordan and Egypt, naturally. And I remember that when I said this, there was a discussion in the High Court of Law about gas in 2014-15, and there was discussion in the High Court of Law, and among other things, and I appeared before the court in the deliberation of the court, and I said to the panel that it is very conceivable that we will also collaborate with Jordan and Egypt in the future and transmit and send them our surplus gas. And I was accused at the time that I am trying to, I don't know, discombobulate the judges and take them down the primrose path, absolutely spinning fantasies. Israel would send gas to Arab countries, but here you are. It's happening in the last few weeks. Here you are. Now, as for Europe, which is just as important in my opinion, we are not going to be their major suppliers of gas for Europe. I mean, with everything that we've discovered in our gas, Russia and Norway will be and remain in the next 20, 30 years the major gas suppliers for Europe probably. But we may be additional minor suppliers like Holland or Algeria, and this is important too. I mean, enormously important. Yes, even if we supply 20% of the natural gas needs of Italy and the Balkans and Greece, this has enormous geostrategic meaning and significance. Now, what happened in 2016, I visited in Abu Dhabi and in the Emirates, and it was a clandestine meeting. I was asked to keep a low profile. Afterwards, I then had a non clandestine, very public meeting. But in any case, we had a meeting about renewable energies. And I visited as head of the Israeli delegation, and I see that there were 3 or 4 people on my hotel floor, and I knew that there was the European Union's energy commissioner on the same floor. So after a brief dip in the waters of the Persian Gulf, I invited the commissioner to coffee in my hotel room. And I said to him, the man's Mr. Kanyeta, of course his name is, and I said to Mr. Kanyeta, I'm going to be the rude Israeli now, sir, and I'm going to talk to you about the energy needs of Europe. The Europeans use a lot of gas, 300, 400 square cubic meters, and you get it for a year, and you get it from Norway, from Russia, from the North Sea. And now the North Sea is beginning to be depleted, after using it for I don't know how many decades. Why shouldn't the Eastern sea replace it? And he says, what's the Eastern Sea? I said, the east of the Mediterranean, the the big rigs of Israel and Cyprus. If we can even technologically open up a pipeline to cut through the Mediterranean directly from the east of the Mediterranean up north to Europe, you will get a very safe a source of gas from Israel, Cyprus, countries that you can rely on, and at prices, with no transmission costs almost. And the European Union thus far has invested $100 billion in planning and initial planning. In 2017, with the good initial results came up, we signed an agreement of principles with several countries. And since some of our gas will be exported through the Egyptian liquefaction installations and facilities, maybe, wait, isn't this competition? No, we have enough gas, it's fine. And also, you should never put your eggs all in one basket. You should have several avenues of export. We have the liquefaction facilities in Egypt. We have the pipeline to Europe. We're also examining the possibility and have talked with the Indian government of sending liquid gas to India. So, but I want to talk about something else. Wait, we have 2 seconds. Okay, then let's make the 2 seconds 2 minutes. No, they won't allow us. No, they'll just turn off our mics. But I do want to talk about one issue that I think is just as important, probably more than the economic factor and the strategic or geopolitical one. Look, the quality of life in a small and very dense and populated country like ours in Israel, public health is something we often ignore, but it does have strategic importance. Because thanks to the fact that we have developed Leviathan and the other sites very soon, within several years, within a decade, we began in 2016, we'll finish in 2025, we are taking all of the energy industry in Israel, the 25 power stations in Israel, which up until a decade ago were, of course, burning coal and crude oil, and within 4 years from today, we're not going to use coal anymore, no crude oil anymore, it's all natural gas, it's all renewable energy. So the result in terms of air pollution is as follows. From 2015 to 25, We are reducing 95% of air pollution in Israel. We've already reduced it by 50% in the next 4 years. We will go through the 90% mark. So by 2025, we have reduced air pollution from the industry in Israel by 95%. So the significance of this is that all of us are going to live a healthier life. Even the economic ramifications in terms of the burden on the health system and social services is enormous. By the way, we are number one in the world. This is what they found in the Madrid Climate Conference. Israel is number one in the world in reduction of use of coal and fossil fuels and replacement of fossil fuels with renewable energy sources. So we talk about money, and geostrategy and economy, but the fact that we are doing this very fast turnaround in the quality of air and environmental parameters in Israel is just as important. So with this great and happy tiding, thank you to the minister, Yuval Steinitz. Thank you very much, and thank you to our audience.